I'm excited to call this debate to order on Resolved. Social media companies should fact check users' posts. I'm now looking for an opening speech in the affirmative, and for that, I'd like to go to Gina Biondo. Gina, if you're ready, you can unmute and offer your speech. You have 4 minutes.
I am ready. I'm Gina Biondo from Houston, Texas. According to a 2024 Pew Research social media fact sheet, 54% of Americans get at least some of their news from social media. Facebook and YouTube lead the race, with about a third of U.S. adults saying they regularly get news on each of these two sites. YouTube uses the International Fact-Checking Network, IFCN for short, to verify content. X, formerly Twitter, uses only notes posted by its users to fact-check. Meta, which includes Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, relied on 90 third-party organizations certified by the IFCN to verify information on its platforms until January of 2025, when it abandoned this approach. Now it is testing the same community note system that has been used by X. Scientific American reported in January of 2025 that posts on X are often flagged as false, too late to reduce engagement, and thus are widely spread. So we may expect the same to be true of Meta. Social media algorithms determine which messages, profiles, and ideas users see. In other words, the algorithms put us in silos that contribute to the divided states of America in which we now live. It's my belief that relying solely on community fact-checking means one silo might fact-check and label a post as disinformation, while another silo might take the post at face value and keep sharing it. According to a January 2025 article by Tech Policy Press entitled "Some Facts About Fact-Checking," 3 criticisms of fact-checking are that it is 1, an illegitimate form of censorship, 2, it's biased toward the left, and 3, it doesn't work. There is truth that it is left biased, but that's because conservative misinformation has been spread more widely. According to a 2024 study by the University of California, Irvine, this is particularly true as it relates to a polarizing issue. Case in point, stating that January 6, 2021 was a peaceful, nonviolent visit to the Capitol. Video live streamed by those breaching the Capitol showed that the intruders assaulted the police with weapons that included bats, flagpoles, bear spray, brass knuckles, metal barricades, wooden furniture legs, and a tomahawk axe. It was not a peaceful visit, yet this event is viewed differently depending upon the information source. A 2024 study by MIT Management Sloan School showed that a warning label about the accuracy of content on social media posts reduces the belief in and spread of disinformation among both blue and red-leaning study participants. My degree was in journalism, and I was taught to report the facts as they were, not as I wanted readers to perceive them. If we couldn't prove it, we couldn't say it unless it was on the opinion page. Unfortunately, traditional media can no longer be relied upon to fact-check. Broadcast news clips that amplify disinformation end up on social media sites. The posts continue to spread until told often enough, the disinformation becomes truth. Without independent third-party fact-checking across all social media, we will continue to experience 2 different versions of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. Now we're looking for questions for the speaker. Anyone have questions here? Tom, I see you've got a question. Please unmute, ask your question to me.
I would like to ask the presenter.
Oh,
Tom
sorry, I meant
Davey or
Tom
Bill?
Davey. I meant Tom Davey. Yep. Tom
Sorry about that.
Calabrese, we'll come to you next. Tom.
Okay. I would like to ask the presenter if, while we all agree that J6 was hardly a peaceful protest, the liberal media has also lied about BLM and other protests, calling the Palestinian protests peaceful is absurd, calling BLM, which also assaulted police officers and other people,
So Tom,
peaceful is also.
Can you come to a question?
My question is, thank you. Would the lady in question comment on that both sides have posted egregiously false narratives. And while the
Got it.
liberal media is
That's good.
happy to
Let's.
talk,
I think that's
I'll
that's a
stop
solid
there.
question. Would the speaker comment on falsehoods on both sides? Thank you, Tom.
There have been falsehoods on both sides. There have been exaggerations, there have been falsehoods. Studies show that they tend to happen more on polarizing issues, and they've tended to happen more on the right than the left.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you to our speaker. We'll go now to another question, and I know we had a hand. I did say to the other Tom that I'd call on him if he'd like to raise his hand, but if I see it's down now, so I'll. Tom, are you back? Yeah, okay. Tom Calabrese, unmute and ask your question to me, please.
I appreciate it. If I do anything out of character here, this is my first one, so I'm trying to learn the ropes,
That's all
so
right.
to speak.
That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for. You go ahead and I'll help you if need be.
I would like the presenter to address the fact that a lot of times when studies are quoted, the studies that are quoted in and of themselves are biased. So if you have a conservative person quoting studies, they're going to quote studies from conservative, sociologists. What there's not many, but and vice versa. It just seems to me
So,
that it's hard to know what to believe, to know who to trust, to be the gatekeeper.
okay, so would the speaker comment on the uh, the bias implicit in studies that she references, kind of thing? Yeah, okay. To our speaker.
I sought to find studies that covered both conservative and liberal leaning views on this. I did not find as many. I did search for reputable sources that could be as neutral as possible. So if they are biased, perhaps that is true, but to the best of my ability, I did seek to find neutral organizations.
Thank you to our speaker. We'll go to one more question here. For our last question, I'll call on Steve Haney. Steve, unmute and ask your question to me, please.
So I would like to ask the speaker where to draw the line. So do social media platforms have to fact check family members telling other family members happy birthday? They have to fact check that that really is the birthday. I know that's an extreme example. The point and the question is, where do you draw the line, both between the type of subject matter and where you what needs to be fact checked and what does not?
Thank you. To our speaker.
To your question, no, I don't think a birthday needs to be fact checked, but I do think if there's a report on an actual event that people can see reported, I happen to subscribe to a service that looks how coverage is done on the left and the right. If you can pull the information from those sources on both sides and fact check, I believe that those kinds of posts that are political or factual in nature should be fact checked.
Wonderful. Thank you for your responses. With that, our speaker is thanked. We're going to move on. I see there are more hands, so keep your questions saved, load them up, and shoot them at another speaker. Well, that's not a really good analogy, is it? Ask them to future speakers, please. We'll go on now to our second speech. We're looking now for a speech in the negative. And for that, I'd like to go to Wendy Beard. Wendy?
Yes,
you can unmute,
I'm
and you
here.
have 4 minutes.
Okay, everybody can hear me? Okay, this was kind of a hard one because ideally I think there should be fact checking because there's a lot of lies and disinformation and selective bias and all kinds of stuff. But I'm very concerned about censorship. So I was going, do I agree or disagree? It depends on how you define fact checking, because I think fact checking should happen and it's important, but I don't, how do you trust the fact checkers? And if fact checking also means censorship, then I have a problem with it. And for example, I know I'm more on Facebook is the one I'm on the most. And for Facebook, I know in the past that they've censored things that were true. And you don't want to censor things that are true. And they've also let falsehoods through. And sometimes they've not even let people be on. And then Twitter, I haven't really been on, but I'm aware that, President Trump was banned from using Twitter. And I'm a strong believer in freedom of speech and freedom of media. And if we're into censorship, that directly goes against the Constitution. And so that my biggest issue is we can't have censorship. If we have warning signs where it's not censorship and you're just saying, warning, this may not be true or whatever, and then some kind of a reference or link so that you can check the other side of it, or you can check to see if it's true or not. I don't have a problem with that. I have been on Facebook before, read a post and seen where I got a warning. This information is suspect, or this information might not be true. And I've actually appreciated that, because then it led me to investigating it. And then I usually agreed with Facebook, that was good to flag it or give you a warning, but they still let me see it. So to me, that's not censorship, because I can still read whatever the post was. I'm just warned about it. But sometimes I've seen where things have been taken down and I don't know what the post was, and I don't know why it was taken down. I don't know anything except that something was censored. And so for me, warnings are okay. Censorship is not okay. And even when there is a warning, it needs to be said, why is there's a warning? And you still get to read the original and make up your own mind, because maybe the fact checker is wrong or biased.
All right. Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate your speech. Wendy, I don't know if you meant to have your face on camera, but we can't quite see you.
Oh, sorry about that. I set my
That's all
phone
right.
down.
That's all right. Hello there. Thank you for your speech.
Hello.
We'll now go to questions for our speaker. Got a few hands up. I'm going to go first to Derek Scott. Derek, please unmute and ask your question to me.
Hi, I would just I would like to ask the speaker what the thoughts are about stopping foreign, international, I guess, misinformation campaigns about elections and such. I mean, even allowing those to come through, if they're knowingly false narratives, might do damage. So
Okay.
would that be censorship?
To our speaker.
I guess I wasn't thinking about that when I prepared my speech. I would think there should be a warning that it's a foreign source, or that it can't be trusted, or why it can't be trusted, that kind of thing. And if we are aware of the fact that there is all this foreign interference, that would be a good thing. Then we know how serious a problem it is.
All right. Thanks for your answer there. Let's go now to another question. We'll go to Richard London. Please unmute, ask your question to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, should there be fact checking on posts that are inflammatory and inciting dangerous behavior? If people get too riled up about the subject, and the subject is could be fact checked, be shown not true.
Thank you for your question, Richard. To our speaker.
Well, if I understand you right, you're saying
If you understand the question, right?
Well, what my understanding is, if somebody's threatening someone, but then you find out it's not true. Well, if it's not even true, then I guess it should be taken down so people aren't thought that they posted something violent that they didn't.
Okay. Thank you for your answer. I think these were pretty quick, so I'm going to go to one more question here, and we have a lot of hands up. I'll go to Jeffrey Bryson. Jeffrey, please unmute. Ask your question to me.
Mr. Chair, I do have one concern.
Do
People
you have a
have
concern
been,
or a question?
well, it's a question based on a concern about confirmation bias, that people seem to jump to conclusions when they see something in social media. My question to the speaker is, can people be trusted to do their own research?
To our speaker.
I would say in general, no. And that's why probably fact checking warnings are probably a good idea, because I think the majority of people don't fact check. But like, again, there's a difference to me between fact checking and warnings and complete censorship of something.
Wonderful. With that, we thank the speaker. Wendy, thank you for taking an extra question there. And we'll now go on to our third speech. Now we're back in the affirmative. We're looking for John D. John D.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to start with a quote. You're entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. That quote originated around 1918, or at least is traceable back as far as 1918, but it's been used by both Republicans and Democrats throughout the years. And the most recent use that I'm aware of is Vice President nominee Pence during the vice presidential debate said that to his opponent at the time. And so that's not hopefully not considered a partisan perspective, because at least it's been something that's been recognized and used by both Republicans and Democrats throughout the 100 plus years. So the reason fact checking, I think, is important. The reason I'm in the affirmative is because I believe society can't function correctly if we can't agree on basic facts. If there's a fundamental breakdown in our ability to discern the distinction between opinions and facts, and to be able to agree on facts, even though we may disagree strongly on opinions, then it could lead to the breakdown of society. So I think it's extremely important to figure out a way to navigate through this successfully. And I think that social media today is one of the contributors to people not having the same understanding of facts. There's others, mainstream media as well, being so polarized, but social media is definitely a major contributor to that consideration. But there are multiple different ways to fact check, and as the first speaker in the affirmative mentioned, there are some on platforms that are considered more right-leaning, and some on platforms that are considered more left-leaning, although she didn't label them as such. But certainly crowdsource approaches such as community notes is something that has been more embraced from the right, and third-party independent fact-checking has been more embraced from the left. And so I'm not necessarily arguing for a particular single form of fact-checking. There can be different types of fact-checking. And I'll acknowledge that this first speaker in the affirmative mentioned an issue with community notes and crowdsourced fact-checking, that it may be too late, that some damage gets done. And I frankly don't know the answer to how to address that. But I do think that it's reasonable for different sources to potentially, social media sources to have potentially different types of fact-checking, so that they can be accepted by from different political perspectives. And I also want to point out that it's possible to fact check without censorship by labeling rather than by removing posts. It's important when there is some sort of, whatever kind of fact checking is done, whether it's crowdsourced or whether it's done through independent third-party fact checkers, it's important that they be nonpartisan if possible, and if not possible, at least bipartisan. And obviously there needs to be mechanisms to work through that and to balance that if that's found not to be the case. So it needs to be a closed loop system to address it. And then finally, I wanted to address free speech in the First Amendment. I would like to point out that if the government,
John, you've got 30 seconds.
Okay, if the government is not forcing a social media platform to fact check and to censor, they're actually the ones. The social media platforms are actually the one that has the free speech right, not the participants. So participants don't actually have a First Amendment right to be heard on a private social media platform. That's the way the Constitution is actually written. The government is the one restricted from doing that. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Right on time. All right, we're now looking for questions for John. Questions for our speaker. Anyone wondering anything? Questions of curiosity? Anne Manisto, please unmute, ask your question to me.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regard to what our speaker talked about facts and having a shared set of facts for a good society, do you feel that
Does the speaker feel yes?
Does the speaker feel that there has been an erosion of people sharing what is a set of facts or truth these days? Because it's something I have seen where people say, well, everything's an opinion. So I would like you to comment. I would like the speaker to talk about the sense that there are fewer facts in the world and more opinions. We'll put it that way.
All right. Thank you, Anne, to our speaker.
Yes, so I certainly agree that there's a lot less agreement on what constitutes facts, and that's the reason I felt it was so important to bring up this topic and to speak on the topic. I would like to just rephrase that slightly, because I wouldn't say that facts that aren't agreed to have become opinions. Facts are something that can be tested and determined to be true or false, whereas an opinion is a perspective on something that is not a fact. And so I think part of the problem is that there is an issue with not enough agreement on facts, but I think we should not conflate facts and opinions.
Thank you, John. We'll turn to another question now. Let's go to Richard Procida. Please unmute, ask your question to me. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong.
Yes, Mr. Chair, does the speaker consider that there may be views that are being suppressed, and does he believe that this fact checking includes suppressing certain ideas? Should certain ideas outside of the law, if calling somebody defamation or something like that, should certain views does your view include that certain things should be taken off the air and excluded?
Thank you for your question, Richard. To our speaker.
Well, I think that's a challenging area. I don't, in general, believe that ideas should be suppressed. I do think that if somebody's calling for violence, that is appropriate to be censored or suppressed, because it is certainly that can actually be the point of being there are such right illegal and but in general, I'm not advocating for
John, you're crackling up a little bit. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I'd love to hear the rest of your answer here. Do you can you hear me okay, John? Oh, now John's frozen. I take it this is the case for everyone. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nods. Okay. Why don't we do this? John, we'll give you a moment here. I'm going to go to another questioner, and maybe John can get things squared away in the meantime. John, I just saw John's green box come back on. John, can you hear us? That's not looking good. John, the one thing I'd suggest here is maybe trying turning off your camera. That sometimes speeds up the service when mine's struggling.
So
yeah. Not
I
sounding
was
better. Go on, John.
I can hear you, but it's being a connection. Okay,
Shoot.
yeah, I was can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back, John. We can hear. I think I can hear John
Okay,
now.
great.
Everyone else can. All right,
Okay,
John. If you remember the question, please continue responding.
Yeah, I do, and I did turn off the video, and that does help. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm not advocating for censoring opinions in general. I think if somebody is advocating for violence, calling for violence, that's something that be illegal in many cases, and I think that could be dangerous. And it's appropriate to censor something like that. But in general, I'm not suggesting censoring ideas that may be controversial. I mean, that is sort of fundamental to the idea of free speech. Although I said that the platforms have the right as a private entity to choose what to platform and what to support and not. I'm not specifically advocating for censoring ideas, even if they're controversial.
Thank you, John. We do have time for one more. We'll go to one more question. I'm going to turn now to Alex McDonald. Alex, please unmute. Ask your question to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard the speaker earlier on describe the one possibility as being having a party from the conservative and one party from the liberal sort of review situations. And I'm curious how the speaker would handle issues that both parties tend to dislike or go against. And one of the previous questioners or speakers mentioned the Palestine issue. That's one issue that on occasion, both the liberal and the conservative tend to dislike. And so I'm curious how the speaker would respond to how that might be fact checked.
Thank you for the question. Wonderful. To our speaker, John?
Yes, thanks. Actually, that's a great question. And I would add another example of that is anything having to do with third parties and opening up voting systems and things like that. The predominant two parties are generally both going to be opposed to that. And so I don't want to suppress those sorts of things, which is why originally I said, ideally, fact checking should be nonpartisan. And then I said, or at the very least, bipartisan. But I do think that having fact checking being nonpartisan is far better and should include views that go beyond the two primary parties.
Thank you, John. Much appreciated. With that, we're done with questions for that speaker. John, thanks for dealing with the tech difficulty, and we thank you for your speech. We're going to move now to another speech in the negative. I'm looking for Pat O'Connell. If you're ready, please unmute, and you have 4 minutes.
Thank you. I oppose the resolution technically because I'm a free speech absolutist with considerations for the things that some of the other speakers have mentioned. If it's already illegal speech, that's the only time it should be censored. I believe our critical thinking skills have been systematically eroded through the use of tools like fact checkers. Having said that, I also support the right of these platforms to insert their own speech or propaganda under whatever label they choose, which some of the other speakers have mentioned also in the spirit of free speech. So when I say I oppose the resolution, I'm specifically addressing the word should. Should implies a kind of obligation, so I'd be equally opposed if the resolution said should not, that the social media should not use fact checkers. I think we've become intellectually lazy. In fact, I think many people find thinking to be hard, like riding your bicycle up a hill hard. It's physically demanding. We've been coasting or even been towed along with no effort by picking certain experts to believe and surrendering our responsibility to the truth. And to be clear, truth isn't the end of the journey. It's the platform upon which we build our most significant decisions and actions. I think if we can't spend 5 minutes to do our own fact checking, then we're no better than that island of trash floating in the ocean, causing untold harm without specific intent. Fact checking on these platforms is never independent or objective. So the speakers who have mentioned this kind of fact checking versus other types of fact checking my experience is that they're always biased. And so I believe that using them as a crutch. If we're aware of their biases, we don't need to read them. And if we're just reading them because we're pretty sure they'll reinforce our own biases, then they're nothing but mind candy, which I'm also okay with, because one of my mantras is know what you're doing and do it on purpose. So we all know social media is designed to destroy our discerning brains and turn us into content consuming machines. Even I, knowing that and knowing how addictive it is, I can feel the dullness when I have been spending a lot of time on social media. And I'm aware of that dopamine driven addictiveness and of the content, the customized content I'm being fed. So I can only imagine what it's doing to less self-aware audiences. So if I had my way, I'd eliminate the fact checking on social media, but I also don't care that it's there. I care more that audiences are so poorly educated or intellectually lazy that they can be swayed by any clearly biased content or triggered by fear-inducing or divisive content. And I'm totally opposed to censorship, which I think we're all in agreement with. So basically, I oppose any kind of proposition that would obligate or require social media to fact check posts. But by the same token, I'd encourage users to do their own fact checking when it matters. And I believe one of the speakers or questioners said sometimes it just doesn't. If it's, does the Kardashians, does the latest Kardashian have a facelift? It doesn't matter. So that's basically where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Appreciate it. We'll now turn to questions for our speaker. And for our first question, I'm going to go to Carrie Lieb. Please unmute, ask your question to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the speaker. I also am a pro First Amendment free speech person, but I have my question is, what happens, and I'm not sure if this falls under the purview of this debate or not, so you can tell me, but what happens when, say, for instance, with AI, and this is happening all the time now, with young girls using, putting naked bodies on these young high schoolers, and it's completely devastating, to them. How do you feel? How does the speaker feel about that sort of thing, where it's obviously the person knows it's not true, and it's really slanderous and horrible, and I'm sure it can ruin people's lives.
Thank you, Carrie. To our speaker.
Carrie, I totally agree. I think that is illegal.
Sorry, address me, Pat.
Sorry.
Address me.
Sorry,
That's all right.
Mr. Speaker. I believe that should be illegal, and I think I just saw something today where there was some movement in that direction to make that kind of co-option of people's likenesses or anything simulating themselves would be illegal. And I'm sure there will have to be all kinds of legal definitions about how that happens, but I'm totally opposed to that. Good question, though.
Thank you, Pat. For another question, we'll go to Scott. Scott Bruce, please unmute. Ask your question to me.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get the difference between looking at fact-checking sources and then doing your own fact-checking. I've gotten into a habit of, before I share a post or respond to a post, to look at media sources that I believe are non-biased. And to do that, I look at the Ad Fontes media bias chart.
Scott, can I ask you to come to a question for the speaker?
Yes. I was just going to do that. Has the speaker heard of that? Do you use that?
Does the speaker
or are there other? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Scott. To our speaker.
Mr. Chair, I'm not familiar with that that particular source, and I would like information about that. I think something like that would be very valuable. What I typically do is triangulate. I actually like to look at opposing fact checks. So if there's multiple fact checks, if my fact check or the Facebook fact check or whatever takes me in one direction, I'll try to find another fact check in another direction. Or anytime I'm reading an article, and if there's a source, a link, a URL link, a hot link in there, I jump to that to see what the study actually said. So I think it would be helpful if we all learned how to triangulate on, try to get closer to the truth. And I don't think we can ever get to the truth these days.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pat. There was a question, there was a hand up not too long ago from someone who I hadn't had the chance to call on yet. I'm going to take a moment. I would have called on that person, but I can also call if that person comes back. Okay, no. I'll go now to Jeffrey Bryson. Jeffrey Bryson, please ask your question to me.
Mr. Chair, there was one statement that stood out in the speech: critical thinking skills have been eroded. My question to the speaker is, if we stop the fact checking and just let everything happen as it would naturally happen, can critical thinking skills make a comeback?
To our speaker.
Mr. Chair, I think it will take time, but I would love to see schools bring back debate, critical thinking. I have actually done a workshop for 4 days at a summer camp for little kids between the ages of 6 and 12. And we had critical thinking classes. We did what is truth, and had all kinds of great exercises for them to see how you find truth, how, the gossip game and all these, how do you know what's truth? So I think there are a lot of ways, if we actually put our minds into our schools and into our children, to work with teaching them how to challenge facts, how to ask, how do you know that?
Wonderful. With that, I thank our speaker and our questioners. We're going to move on to another. We've got lots of speeches tonight. I'm really excited to have a number of people interested in sharing their views. So we've finished our kind of first round of opening speakers that we curated in advance, and I noted that there are a lot of questions. There were a lot of questions for that speaker there that didn't get asked. So please keep raising your hands and asking questions. I'm trying to make sure that everyone who wants to participate and ask a question will get a chance to ask one. Now I'm going to turn to another speech in the affirmative. For that, I'm going to go to Ed Gracely, otherwise known as *R through Z Whip Ed. Ed's one of our staff tonight. Ed, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, sir. The question under consideration is whether social media should be subject to fact-checking. My answer is yes. It's far too easy for misinformation to circulate when it isn't checked. But what I want to talk about more than whether is the how. I think it's critical that fact-checkers get buy-in from both sides and be regarded as credible sources. Currently, there's a strong argument from the right that most fact-checkers have liberal leanings. The more conservative ones that do exist seem to be less active. So how can this be improved? Well, first of all, to what extent is it true? One of the first things Donald Trump said when inaugurated in 2016 was that he had the biggest inaugural crowd ever. Even his supporters recognize that he has given to off-the-cuff, often outlandish, self-promoting statements that just beg to be fact-checked and are often wrong. Now we have Elon Musk making similar statements about the purported wonders of Doge, and we have conspiracy theories in high positions. If this all leads to a lot of conservatives being checked and found wrong, is that bias or reality? Attacking your critics is a standard defense. An independent study by the NYU Stern Center in 2019 found that, quote, social media platforms are not biased against conservatives, as they've long claimed. What's more, the analysis combines a variety of independent data sources to support the argument that, on the contrary, social media platforms actually boost right-leaning voices, unquote. The study calls the persistent claims of anti-right bias itself a form of disinformation. I know, you're going to say it. The study may be biased. Yep, every study has its biases too, but it seemed pretty solid and academic. Fact checkers that are reputable follow codes of ethics, they state their arguments, and they provide sources. You can judge for yourself if their argument is as good as they say. Neutral reviews do classify many of the best-known fact checkers as, quote, leaning left, unquote. But that doesn't make them dishonest or inaccurate. They may indeed have a tendency to check conservatives more, but they certainly do check both sides. So what would I recommend? First, I think fact checkers really should focus on checking facts that can be clearly shown to be true or false. For example, was Nancy Pelosi just arrested? Did the Pope endorse Donald Trump's candidacy? Did Barack Obama really introduce his long-lost half-brother at his inauguration? This one is a good example. It was from a humor magazine, The Onion, but they removed the source so you couldn't tell. Complex claims require a different approach, not a fact checker. Examples: was the economy better under Biden or Trump? What is the impact of tariffs on the economy? Does Hunter Biden's laptop implicate Joe Biden in wrongdoing? Could COVID-19 have originated in a lab? I think these kinds of claims are best left to scholars and analysts. Fact checkers just get in over their head when they investigate them. Second, fact checkers need to have staff with both liberal and conservative leanings and allow both their choice of facts to check and how they approach them to be reviewed and subject to judgment. Readers should know how they lean. Third, fact checkers should always provide their sources and spell out their arguments so readers can judge for themselves. Fortunately, the most reputable fact checkers already do this. There's a big difference between clear evidence that a claim is false, like showing the source of the claim about Obama's long-lost brother, and weasel word approaches like saying such and such doesn't necessarily mean that. I sometimes find myself saying about even my go-to fact checkers that I think they turned what should have been a maybe into a false, or a probably false into pants on fire. If you're willing to read carefully and use your judgment, a lot of the bias is mitigated. Given all
You've
of,
got 30 seconds.
I think we're better off with fact checkers on the job than without them. Thank you. I have time for myself.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ed.
Welcome.
We're now looking for questions for our speaker. Would anyone like to ask Ed a question? Let's go to Bernard. Bernard Curry, please unmute and ask your question to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm puzzled by arguments that I hear from this speaker and some prior speakers. Let me pose a kind of a stark question. My sense is there are hundreds of millions of social transmissions across the internet every single day. And somehow to advocate that the platforms should be fact-checking them strikes me as an absurd idea in the first place. Does that mean
the question
that,
is?
and so the question really is, what do I misunderstand about the argument in favor of fact-checking? So my concern is that it's an overwhelming and almost incomprehensible idea that every social transmission somehow would be fact-checked and would carry some kind of a tag along with it. So I'd appreciate you addressing this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard.
That's a good
Our
question.
speaker, yeah, as you wish.
I don't think anybody's suggesting that every transmission across the internet be fact-checked. That's meaningless. All the individual people throwing stuff out. But on the other hand, I think media platforms have mostly figured out what kinds of things do need to be fact-checked. I mean, when famous people, when politicians, when elected officials, et cetera, make statements, et cetera, those are the things they're going to fact check. They're not going to affect Joe Blow making a comment on his personal Facebook page. I think they can figure out those differences pretty straightforwardly, although it probably is a challenge.
All right, thank you. I'm going to turn now to our previous speaker, Pat. Please unmute, ask your question to me.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to know if the speaker mentioned having fact checkers that are getting buy-in from both sides, and I'm really intrigued by that notion. How would he propose to get speakers who are fact checkers who are representing both sides without accidentally including people who are fake representatives of each side, like rhinos on the right or politically marooned liberals who really aren't liberals anymore?
To our speaker, how would the scheme work?
Interesting question. I think I hadn't really thought about the possibility of there being large numbers of fake conservatives and fake liberals, I think we could probably find a fair number of reasonably reputable individuals that people in the community would recognize as responsible and appropriate people. I don't think that would be all that difficult to do.
Thank you for your response, Ed. We've got one more question here. I'm going to go to Laura Scutch. Laura, please unmute, ask your question to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, there's a quote that says, statistics never lie, but statisticians do. So, like, how do we, first of all, fact checkers are often paid and are an arm of a very much larger network of, you know, kind of shadow organizations. And so it just seems like an overwhelming, how would you know what a fact is? What is a fact? I mean, I think at this point, we have corruption in science, we have corruption in the media, we have corruption in the courts, we have corruption so endemically and so seriously. I can't be sure of anything anymore. So
let's go there. Let Laura, how about, as you said, what is a fact? Does that sound good?
Yeah, how would you decide what
how would the speaker
fact is? Yes, you, Mr. Speaker.
No, how would the speaker decide? Yeah, to our speaker, Ed.
All right, Mr. Chair.
Good question. Like I said, the best fact checkers provide their sources, and you can look those up. Now you can say the sources could be biased too, but I think that's why I say I think the best fact checking is for things that are clearly true and false. You know, if there's a picture of Obama saying that this is his long lost brother, and a site can show you the story in the Onion where that came from, and it's clearly humor, there's no question that they've correctly identified the source. That's different from making a complicated argument based on all kinds of details and claims and assertions. There, it's much more complicated. But I think true facts, you usually can tell. People aren't going to lie to your face and saying this is from the Onion when it's not. They're going to be found with their pants down doing that. So I think there's some degree of ability to tell what's a fact in that way.
All right, with that, we thank our speaker. Thank you, Ed. We're going to move on now to another speech in the negative. This is great, all. Thanks so much for your sophisticated questions, and to our speakers for their wonderful responses. I'm looking now for a speech in the negative from Alex Weissenfels. Alex, please unmute. You've got 4 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, speaking as an existentialist epistemologist, someone who breaks things down to the basic building blocks to figure out how we come to think we know what we know, I believe it's dangerous for people to develop the habit of trusting large social media companies to tell them what is true and what isn't. If we want to get out of our echo chambers and stop the spread of misinformation, we need to develop the habit of suspending judgment on the things that we hear. Because everything we think we know is an assumption. We need to learn how to decide which assumptions are safe to make for practical purposes. And we need to take responsibility for making our own decisions based on the evidence available to us. If the accuracy of a posted statement matters for our decisions, then we should take action ourselves to learn more about the situation. But when a social media company tells us the conclusion we should come to, it alienates people who don't already subscribe to that conclusion, while those who agree with it could get a dependence on the social media company when it comes to evaluating assertions. So for example, if a social media company flags a study as misinformation because it seemingly provides counter evidence to climate change, people who don't subscribe to climate change concerns will conclude that climate change activists are attempting to silence dissent, and that will make constructive conversations more difficult. Meanwhile, those who are concerned about climate change will conclude that the study itself is misinformation, even if the study itself is completely valid, regardless of what it actually implies about climate change in general. And then those same people may trust the social media company when it labels posts about violence or war as misinformation in order to favor one side or the other for political reasons. Not to mention, fact-checking would normally be done by automated or AI systems, which would inevitably lead to some mislabeling of posts with nuanced perspectives about the issue at hand. And finally, it's important to keep in mind that what we're willing to accept as fact depends on what we're willing to risk being wrong about. Facts are predictions, and predictions are risks. Different people in different positions to sorry, let me just start the sentence over. Different people are in different positions to deal with the consequences of a particular risk, so we will interpret the same evidence differently. But the good news is that to proceed forward, we actually don't have to all agree on what's probably true. We just need to find an approach that addresses everyone's concerns about the risks that they face, regardless of whether we share those concerns. But we won't be able to do that if we abdicate responsibility for drawing our own conclusions, because we will forget that drawing a conclusion means taking the risk of being wrong and asking others to take the same risk. Instead, we will become further divided and prone to manipulation by those who decide what the correct interpretation of the evidence is. I believe we can do better than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I would like to go to Roman for a question. Roman Stearns, please unmute.
All right, I'll ask this question a little bit facetiously, but a little bit seriously. I appreciate the speaker's comments. Those who don't have teenage kids may not understand this question, so I'll explain it. But the question is, are we cooked? Like, are we done for? Is this even a solvable problem that we're trying to address? And it goes back to one of the other questioners' comments about there's so many posts, and sure, we can fact check, politicians, or we can fact check, but the reality is there's so much information out there and so many posts constantly. Is this like a moot point to even be debating?
Got it. Thank you, Roman. To our speaker.
I understand where you're coming. My apologies. I understand where the questioner is coming from, and I do appreciate the feelings behind it. I firmly believe that we are not cooked. I believe that, well, and the work that I'm doing actually is to help people make decisions together, regardless of the risks that people differ on willingness to take. Because when we look for better options that address everyone's concerns, we can find them. And another thing to say, risks. So I will probably come back to that.
All right. Well, if it comes to you in response to another question, Alex, you can look back. For our next question, I want to go to Lori. Lori, please unmute and ask your question to me.
Mr. Chair, I'm thinking that many of the speakers are referring to the fact that we need to be doing our own thinking. We need, we get lazy if somebody tells us what's true and what's not true. And I do agree with that. But I think, people maybe in this audience do that naturally. But I think there's a large number of people out there who don't think about their thinking.
And so the question is?
And the question is, how do you, if a huge number of people out there don't think about their thinking and they're not getting any fact checking, where does that leave us? That's what I'm asking the speaker.
To our speaker, where does that leave us?
Another good question. That also ties in with what I remembered I was going to answer before. So regardless of whether or not we choose to implement automated fact checking, we do need people to start thinking independently. And we can make that easier when we break things down into the basics. We actually have to start with values. We have to start asking ourselves, why do I care whether this fact is true or false? Or this statement is true or false? What will I do differently depending on the answer? So that's facts are as facts do. That's the existentialist part. So what that does is it makes it a lot easier for us to trim out the irrelevant parts of this overwhelming sea of information and just look at what would I do differently if vampires or ghosts were real or aliens? And then how would I know if the situation changed? And that lets us go through life practically without having to research all of the evidence on every side and come up with a conclusive answer.
Alex, thank you for your response there. I'm going to go to one more question for you. Derek, go right ahead. Ask your question to me.
My question to the previous speaker it seems like he's advocating for the status quo, and which has gotten us into a very divisive nation. And instead of dealing with the problem at its source, I think, are you suggesting we're going to
Is
treat
the
it by
speaker suggesting?
curing all the people? I mean, it just
Yeah,
seems like,
that's
how do we fix a problem that this exact same status quo has created?
thank you for phrasing it that way. Alex?
Well, I am certainly not in favor of the status quo. So what I'm trying to do is help people collectively make decisions and find constructive paths forward by addressing each other's concerns. And that includes what we're concerned about being wrong about. And we don't actually have to agree on facts to start doing that. So there is a path forward. I just don't believe that fact checking on social media is going to be a large part of that. I do think it could be nice to supplement resources automatically, but I don't think that people should come to rely on it.
All right. After 3 questions, our speaker is thanked. Appreciate your time there. We're going to turn now to another speech in the affirmative. I'm now looking for Ed Freeman.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Got
And
4
I have
minutes.
3 points. First off, this whole problem comes from a law passed in 1996, the Communication Decency Act, that gave internet companies a specific call out and immunity from liability. 30 years on, we can ask how well that law is done, and the answer is terribly. Internet companies like Facebook, X, they should be held to the same liability standards as other publishers. That includes what third-party publishers are doing. That solves a lot of problems. Second off, and this is something I'm struggling with, is that our modern media environment and technology have broken our ideas of free speech. First off, we have a handful of companies that have tremendous sway. Our ideas about freedom of the press was from the idea that a newspaper would be in a town, not worldwide. And second off, people have talked about quite a bit about doing their own fact checking. That's kind of impossible. Take one issue like climate change. It takes a whole career to truly fact check that one issue. And my third point is about the feasibility of fact checking. Fortunately, this is becoming a solved problem. Generative AI like ChatGPT has a big problem. It hallucinates, it gets stuff wrong. That means the AI companies, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, they have a vested interest and are putting a tremendous amount of money, brains, and time into having a system that will get fact checking right and make sure that statements are truthful. Now, those are my 3 points, so I'll turn the remaining minutes back to the chair.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate your comments. Floor is now open to questions for our speaker. Would anyone like to ask the speaker a question? Give it a moment here. Any questions for our
That
speaker?
good or that bad?
Nope. They always come in after a second. Don't worry, Ed. All right.
Okay, there we go.
Oh yeah, and see, they came in a flurry. Let's go to Paul. Paul, please unmute.
Yeah, so the speaker says that it takes a whole career to understand certain issues. And yet, would you not agree that it's still true?
Would the speaker not agree?
Just checking if you're watching me there, Sam. Just checking if the speaker would agree that even after somebody spends a whole career studying an issue, couple of things happen. One is they become part of a tribe, which has, and the tribe acts like a tribe, protecting its own interests, and still subject to all the issues of human bias.
What does the speaker make that?
Several points is that, yes, there's always human bias, but also it is not necessarily true that experts become part of the tribe. Many experts become iconoclasts and dedicate their career to standing against the tribe.
Thank you. Let's go now to Natalie. Natalie, please unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. To draw on the words of the previous questioner, it sounds like this speaker thinks we may be cooked.
If you don't run, like you decided not to run, that's okay, but you need to have a conversation
All right,
with
can
coach. You can't just.
Let's mute everyone here. There we go. Go ahead, Natalie.
So, to draw on the words of a previous questioner, it sounds like this speaker may indeed think we are cooked. And I'm wondering if he has any hope for media literacy. Is there anything we can do to make our social media environment one we can coexist with?
To our speaker?
Yes, two things. First off, make social media companies liable for posts. That if I post something hurtful or terroristic, then if I do that on Facebook, then Facebook then becomes liable. Their policies are going to change real fast. And second off, as I was saying in the affirmative, have actual standard fact checking that can be established. I mean, Google is neither right or left. Anthropic is neither right or left. OpenAI is neither right nor left. But they all have and are putting a lot of effort into getting their fact checking right. So it's like we're cooked, but we can get out of the pot.
Thank you for extending the analogy, Mr. Speaker. We've got room for one more question here, and for that, I'll go to John D. John?
Yeah. Sorry, I would just like to applaud the speaker for raising both of those points about AI, companies having an incentive to solve the problem.
Do you have a question for the speaker?
No, I'm sorry, I don't, but I felt it needed to be said to applaud what he said.
All right, we'll go to, we've got one more hand up, so we'll go to Bernard for a question. Bernard, you've got a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The speaker addressed the Communication Privacy Act for some 30 or 40 years ago. I wonder if it isn't the problem rather than being triggered by that legislative act, isn't the problem really triggered by the technology that amplifies information so that especially incendiary baseless information gets really inflamed and amplified? So isn't the issue really less about fact checking and more about the amplification of information that capitalizes on the weaknesses of people who get attracted to inflammatory information rather than information that explicates or explains anything?
To our speaker.
I would say, apropos of that the issue there is that major companies are not liable for what they post, are not liable for the message they put out. And that is the fundamental issue, that we're letting them make money off of incendiary posts without any liability. It's like we're allowing polluters to get away with polluting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And with that, our speaker is thanked. Appreciate your response to those questions, and thank you to all of our questioners. We're going to turn now. This is it's funny, I kind of set it up this way, looking at our queue here, but we've got another speech now in the negative, though, also mentioning that Communications Decency Act. We're going to turn to Steve Haney. Steve, you can unmute. You've got 4 minutes.
Yes, thank you. So I applaud the recent discussion, Mr. Speaker, from both sides, the questions and the answers. I too think that the root problem is Section 230. That's the section that gave social media platforms immunity. That was another time in another world where it maybe made a little bit of sense, but it doesn't anymore. I think that this is a huge problem. Misinformation, disinformation, people getting their news from social media causing harm to adolescent girls, causing anxiety and even suicide. It's a huge problem and it must be addressed. And the correct way to address it, I believe, is not fact checking, but but modifying that section 230. And I would modify it as follows. I would say that if I am watching my people post from my friends list, or people that I have clicked on, I follow on social media, if I'm following them and they give me bad information, that's between me and them. I need to know who it is I'm following and so on. However, if social media causes misinformation and disinformation to go viral because of their algorithms, because they're trying to get more clicks and more eyeballs, make all kinds of money on social media, they need to be liable for that. If they send me information, posts that I didn't select, I didn't follow, I'm not friending, they just sent me misinformation and disinformation because they're looking for clicks and eyeballs and causing, you know, people to be titillated and want more. Well, they need to be held liable. They need to be brought into the real world where they are responsible for their actions, whether they're hurting someone or whether they're just spreading lies, misinformation, slander, libel, whatever. And along with this, there needs to be more transparency than there is now, especially for law enforcement or where lawsuits are involved. Social media needs to provide the source. And it can't be bots, can't be Russian agents and so on. They've got to provide and hold themselves accountable that the people they allow to post are bona fide people with standing to post. So again, my point is I would put the onus back on the social media companies to follow the law that we otherwise expect in real life people have to follow. So section 230, as it's written, has to go. That was another age, another time. It's not relevant now. It needs to be rewritten in the age of social media and in brought up to date.
Thank you, Steve. We're going to turn to questions now. Got one from Anne. Anne Manistow, you can unmute.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for the speaker in regard to the fact that the speaker is discussing what really would be legislation, laws, things that would need to happen in Congress, maybe executive order, who knows? In this climate that we're in this current administration, do you believe that there are realistic chances? Does the speaker believe that there are realistic chances of this happening anytime soon?
So, yes, very good question, but aren't we all expecting some kind of legislation? If we were to say, yeah, they need to fact check, all social media must fact check, doesn't that entail legislation? I was very excited to see that Trump just signed, and even Melania signed legislation making it illegal to do revenge porn, for example. So maybe there's hope. And I think hope begins with education and enlightenment. Why do we have this problem? Section 230, what does that do? Does it make sense today? Why was it written 30 years ago, 35, whatever it was, in a whole different world where social media wasn't even really born yet? What are the social media companies doing today to abuse the privilege that they have in making disinformation, misinformation go viral, making harmful content to adolescents go viral.
All right, we'll turn to another question now. Sandy Hebley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question for the speaker is, if we are going to hold media companies accountable for misinformation and disinformation, does that not then require that they be fact checking so that they know whether they're sending us misinformation or disinformation?
A wonderful pointed question to our speaker.
Hi, Sandy, good to see you.
Oh, sorry, Steve, that's very generous and kind of you, but you're still supposed to address me.
I'm sorry. Mr. Chair, tell Sandy hello. I'm sorry, just a joke. No, I think that it doesn't require fact checking per se. It would require social media companies in their own interest, if they want to avoid getting sued, to be very, very careful in what their algorithms do, making disinformation and misinformation and harmful content go viral. And that there's a offsetting cost to, clicks and eyeballs.
All right, we'll go for one last question here to Tom Davey. Tom, you can unmute and ask your question to me.
If we're going to hold social media platforms legally responsible for posting bad information, who is the arbiter of what is and is not correct?
To our speaker.
The courts, if they get sued, it goes to court. They present evidence. The prosecution and defense both present evidence, and the court decides. And hopefully that would happen much, 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 much more rarely than disinformation and misinformation happen now. Because they'd be much more careful about it.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off as you were finishing, Steve. With that, okay. Our speaker is thanked. We thank him. We're going to turn now to another speech. I'm trying to decide here. Maybe we should speed things up. We've got a number of speeches here. Yes, let's do it. I want to try and get everyone in today. So why don't we go, we'll go down to 3 minutes for at least the next round of speeches. And then we'll see what happens next. For our next speech in the affirmative, I'm going to turn to Bob Viney. Bob, you can unmute, and you've got 3 minutes. Bob? Do we still have a Bob?
There we go.
Oh, hey there.
Hi.
3 minutes.
The issue about fact checking really is founded in, is false speech protected, or is it just something that we feel is bad and should be communicated to people if it's false? And I think the history of the legal issues in speech regulation is that we have many aspects of harmful speech that are currently regulated. False speech, for example, in commercial speech, false speech is not free speech. A company can't tell you that a product is safe or wasn't made with foreign products if it was. That the FTC is authorized to enforce the standard of, quote, legal and non-misleading, close quote, messaging. Also, Fox News was fined $980 million for putting out false information during the 2020 election. So political speech is an area where we have not regulated. But if you consider the harm that false political speech has caused recently, all it needs to be done is to consider that false political speech can be harmful to individuals, organizations, and the democratic process of choosing which candidates and policies we're going to support as a citizenry. And I would throw medical speech in with there too. Medical speech, false medical speech, actually can lead to greater death rates if people have their choices manipulated by false information. So the solution is what's been said before, is modify Section 230 to make the social media platforms liable. And the fact checker is, as it is today in commercial speech, the fact checker is the originator. The social media platforms are only required to ask the originator of viral information, what
Bob,
is
15
your
seconds.
evidence?
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, Bob, for your speech. Just under 3 minutes there. Go to questions now. I might take a couple less in this round. Yeah, I'm going to go to Carrie. Carrie, you've got the floor.
Thank you. My question for the speaker, Mr. Chair, is I'm all for this. I've never heard of Section 230. I'm all for it. So what can I do as just a normal citizen? Should I write my Congress people? I don't know what to do, but I want to get on this because I think that's really brilliant and I think that would go a long way.
To our speaker.
Yes, I think the answer is to write to your representatives, make them aware that you know about this liability protection for social media platforms in Section 230, and you are in favor of having it eliminated because, as I think it was Bernard said, it is outdated. It was made when social media when the internet was at a very nascent stage. And we did not use social media the way we're using it now.
Thank you.
All right, we got one more question, and we'll just do 2 questions each this round. So, Tom, your hand is up. I don't know, that's a new question, yes?
It's a new question, but it's a little bit similar to my old one. Facts change. We learn new things, science progresses, ideas progress. We have seen, particularly during COVID, ideas are outside the mainstream, were censored, and then they turned out to be correct or at least not incorrect. And I'm always concerned, you're talking about the courts
Tom,
and government.
Can you come to a question real quick?
Where is the protection of the citizen and the speaker if the government, people are going, my concern is, how does the speaker feel that by any speaker being subject to litigation or government regulation for what they reasonably believe is correct, even if it's outside the mainstream, how do you protect speakers from the tyranny of the masses and the government?
To our speaker.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the answer is, what evidence does the speaker have for the statement they've made at the time they made it? And then it's up to the social media platforms, not the government, to decide if that evidence is satisfactory. Does it satisfactorily support what they have said? If it does, then they let it go. If it doesn't, then they have the responsibility to take it down, or they can be liable if it is later determined to be factually false and causes harm and damage.
Thank you, Bob. We're going to go on to our next speech here now. Instead of having more questions, we've got a lot of speeches left, and I've got in just a second I'll explain how we're going to get through them all. We're going to one more speech of 3 minutes with a couple of questions. Now in the negative, I'm looking for Lisa Mayer or Meyer. Please correct my pronunciation if you like.
Hi, it's Mayor. Thank you.
Mayer.
Okay, so I just wanted to share a little bit of a more personal perspective because I was censored incorrectly and fact-checked incorrectly on Facebook during the pandemic for sharing things that were based on published peer-reviewed research on the NIH website and expert opinion. And these things were, like I said, fact-checked and censored at the time, but now they're widely acknowledged to be true, after a lot of scrutiny. So that was really difficult. They were wrong, and I knew I was telling the truth, and to be fact-checked and censored like that felt really dystopian. It was kind of life-changing, actually. The aggressive censorship and biased fact checkers during COVID kept people in the dark and took away their informed consent about important things. And at that time, opinions were formed and they were solidified. And like Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they've been fooled. So these opinions, that were incorrectly formed during that aggressive fact checking still exist today. And this whole thing made me realize how we're living in a curated information landscape. As a previous speaker noted, fact checkers are rarely independent. And even media bias evaluations are biased, and that includes Ad Fontes. They rate The Hill as low bias, but The Hill is anything but. All you need to do is scroll through their social media and you'll see that they are very left biased. Big tech has been censoring certain
Lisa,
topics
you got 30 seconds.
without most people even being aware of it. And Google also is left biased. So these industry funded fact checkers is just more manipulation of public opinion, and no one can claim to be an independent ministry of truth.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll turn now to questions. Gonna go to a max of 2 questions here. First, Ed.
I wonder if the speaker could tell us a couple examples of what things she stated that were censored that turned out to be true.
Sure, I would love to. Yep. So one of them was a paper that was on the NIH, published, I believe, in 2015, that said that chloroquine was a potent preventative and helped to cure. Chloroquine helped to prevent and cure SARS-CoV-1. The researchers couldn't have been more excited about its efficacy. And so hydroxychloroquine, was its, what was created after that. And then SARS-CoV-2, was very similar to SARS-CoV-1 in many ways. So it made a lot of sense that it would really help for COVID. And it did. And there were even like fake studies published that had to be retracted about hydroxychloroquine. So that was something that could have saved a lot of lives if that wasn't artificially suppressed. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is there are decades and decades of research that masks don't stop respiratory viruses unless it's something like an N95 that's glued to your face. If there's no gap, it can help, but masks only stop bacteria. And a huge reviews, meta-analyses have shown that to be true.
Do we have another question for our speaker? Otherwise, we'll move on to our last speeches. All right, with that, our speaker is thanked. So here's what we're going to do. I've got 3 more affirmatives and 3 more negatives. And we have exactly 12 minutes. So I'm going to do a lightning round here where everyone gets a minute and a half for their speech. We won't do questions, and we'll just do the last speeches so that everyone can have the chance to have the floor and share their thoughts. So I'm going to go first to Sandy Hebley. Sandy, you got a minute and a half, and then we'll go on to someone in the negative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go back to some things that were said at the very beginning in several of the very early speakers who seemed to conflate fact-checking with censorship. And I personally am pro fact checking and anti censorship. The idea of flagging information that has been determined to be inaccurate, just to say, and I agree with the speakers who've said that we should have the sources of that information, that these sources have said that this information is true or not true, and they can be flagged that way so that then people can do their own research if they want to go back and follow those sources. There is such a wide variety of topics that are floating out there in the internet that I personally don't have the knowledge to fact check all of them. And if the media companies had a panel of, which I think they did at one time at least, have a panel of fact checkers who could be balanced left and right, or whatever, however you want to label them, but they should be balanced and have sources that could
15
say
seconds,
why.
Sandy.
That's it. If they can say why this is accurate or not accurate and flag them as such, but not censor them.
All right. Our speaker is thanked. Ooh, this is fun. Lightning round. Okay, we're moving on to a speech in the negative now. We'll go to Tom Davey. Tom, you got a minute and a half.
See if I can do it in 70 seconds. I would argue that social media should be a public square. In other words, at public square, people speak as they wish. The people who maintain the public square are not held liable for what is said in the public square. In the same way, I do support Decency and Communication Act that social media platforms should not be held liable for things that are said upon them, because when they are held liable, they become the censor. There's a lot of smart people who disagree with that, but I'm just going to make that bold statement and return my time.
Thank you, Tom. Very brief. I appreciate that a lot. We're going to go now to another speech in the affirmative. Vern McGeorge, minute and a half. Take it away.
Yes, existing social media algorithms maximize engagement. And so they promote the most outrageous, most inflammatory, most, sticky content. I believe that they should balance that with reputation, because I think that AI and or juries of high reputation individuals or other fact-checking means can determine who are the people that are essentially lying to us on both sides, and give them the small microphone. Give the big microphone to people that have a reputation for being truthful. And I'm wondering how we can incentivize or get to something like that.
All right, the speaker's thanked. Appreciate it, Vern. We'll go now to Paul Norris. Paul, you got a minute and a half if you like it.
You surprised me. Well, we're talking here about facts as if we all know what that means. And I would suggest rather than talking about facts, we should think in terms of levels of uncertainty or levels of certainty. And, I'm taking something from physics here and quantum mechanics, where we now understand, that we can't know both where a particle is and how fast it's going. So I agree. I'm pushing towards thinking in terms of levels of certainty. And this is probably on an individual basis. And I'm speaking up for humility. And I think if we just look at how human brains operate, a couple things are really obvious. One is that our brains are designed to focus on certain data and eliminate most of it. And I just read an interesting article that said that our thoughts are basically going at about 10 bits per second, whereas the sensory input that we have coming in is like billions and trillions of bits per second. So,
Speaking of seconds, 15 of them, Paul.
So in order to focus, we have to focus and eliminate data. And secondly, I just want to point out that we're tribal animals and we think and act accordingly. So a lot of what we consider to be truth are just tribal agreements. And that's 1 minute, 29 seconds. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Paul. Last two speeches here, one in the affirmative and then one in the negative. Going to go to Richard
All right,
Richard
thank
Procia.
you. Proceda. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when I was younger, I had a spiritual experience in a feminist studies class. And I started in a pro-feminist anti-pornography organization. I went and I spoke at different colleges, but I listened. And one lady said, you know, rather than censorship, what we need is more speech. And here, face it, these social platforms are a public forum. Therefore, the people's speech, individuals' speech, more precious than the media companies' speeches. And so if we criminalize them or hold them accountable, maybe we should hold them accountable only when they don't fact check. Because in order to maintain free speech, we're going to need that fact checking. Otherwise, it's going to lead to censorship. And I guess that's it. So we can't hold them accountable, and we can't charge them, but we also want to maintain that free speech. We're going to need to be able to have people have fact checking, because more information is better than less information. And then let people use that information as they will. It doesn't have to be, and otherwise we're going to have censorship.
All right. Right on time. Thank you, Richard. And thanks for correcting my name, or my pronunciation of your name. Our last speech here for the night will be Jeffrey Bryson. Jeffrey, if you're still here, you're welcome. Yep, there you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I have a lot of experience with being fact-checked over the years. I run a lot of administrative, I admin for a lot of political philosophy, religious chats, groups across many different platforms of social media. I do have a tendency to do a lot of dry analysis about facts and statistics, but I also like to create content that pops, that generates debate, discussion. Not necessarily true, but over the years I've noticed that it doesn't matter if it's true or not to the fact checker. They'll flag things that don't make any sense to flag. Some things do make sense, like altered pictures that are formed into memes, maybe parody articles or memes, but it's fact checked Newsweek articles. I mean, every single Newsweek article I posted for a few years was flagged and then taken down. I have no idea why. And it will flag other fact checking websites. Sometimes I'll comment on something. It's just like a very benign comment. Fact checks that. And then it fact checks screenshots of its own fact checking and says that's false. So I'm kind of against this whole thing of fact checking, just because it seems absurd for that reason. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jeffrey. With that, all of our brave speakers are thanked. We came in, we got everyone in, we got a little bit of time here still for the next stage of our debate, which is important. But we got about 13 minutes left. I want to make sure you all are out of here by the originally scheduled departure time. So with seeing that the time on the clock here, I think we're ready to adjourn the debate. We got through all our speeches. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Okay, that was a lot of seconds. Third, fourth, fifth. All right. With that, I've just adjourned our debate, having been moved and seconded. Thank you all. Whew. That was a really rigorous discussion. It was a ton of fun to listen to. Thank you all for your participation, for your questions, your speeches, and for bearing with me as I intervened in my annoying little way with a bit of a snide grin as I corrected you if you have made a mistake. I appreciate all those, especially those who gave a speech for the first time or who asked a question for the first time, because I know that the format can be a little bit tricky. Please don't leave yet. I should have been watching. I should have said that right out the gate. Now's the time for our debrief. This is a really important part of the debate. It's where we can all share some thoughts and insights and things we learned, things we enjoyed about the discussion that we just had. I want to thank all of you for participating and for participating in the debrief to come. It's just been really great. So on the table here, and you've just seen this go in the chat, we're going to ask, what did you learn and what did you enjoy? Now I'll take raised hands from any of you who would like to share, but I do want to note, and then our participant manager, Darren, has just opened the chat so that you can share there if you prefer. But remember that the debate is adjourned, so this is not the time to give the speech. Oh, sorry, Darren, can I have you put leave that for just a second? Yeah, thank you. So this is not the time to give the speech that you wish you'd given during the debate, although we didn't have any more people who wanted to give speeches, so hopefully this is not a problem. This is the time for reflection on things you learned, things you enjoyed. And so trust me, I kind of know all the tricks now. Don't tell me that you learned how stupid the other side is, or that you learned that everyone needs to recognize that such and such argument is persuasive, because I've heard that before too. But of course, this doesn't mean you can't express legitimate criticism of the debate or its structure or of me, but generally we're asking now for something that you didn't know before or something constructive you'll take away. So with that, seeing some hands, I'm excited to hear what you all thought. What did you learn? What did you enjoy? Let's go first to Kit.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm
not Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay, you're Sam again. Okay, hi, Sam.
Hey,
I have been online. I'm 35. I have been online in some form since I was like 10, which is a little scary to think of now. So I had forgotten that Section 230 was a thing and that it influenced what I could do when I was younger versus like what social media is like now, because I've been using things like LiveJournal and discussion forums and Neopets since way before social media existed. So I do want to thank everyone who brought up Section 230. I'm going to be looking into it again and seeing if I need to revisit my opinions on it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kit. Let's go now to Steve.
So speaking of Section 230, I have posted in the chat, to learn more, read The Death of Truth by Stephen Brill, and that is posted in the chat.
And did you learn? What did you learn? What did you enjoy, Steve?
Oh, I learned quite a bit, and I especially liked the people that agreed with me.
All right. Thanks. We'll move to Ed. What'd you learn? What'd you enjoy?
Well, what I learned and enjoyed was that we had Section 230 people on both sides of this question.
Indeed. Indeed we did. I was really excited to see that in the speaker queue. Anne?
I think I learned that this topic is huge, and you could almost teach a college course on something like this because it covers so many things. It covers the concepts of, censorship and free speech. And I also enjoyed going back to 1996, which is the year of the Communications Decency Act. I worked in the library at the time, and it was, it led to CIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act. And I do believe that there is a need for the world, the country, to come to grips with the major communication revolution that we have gone through in this internet, social media age that we're living in, and that it has affected every aspect of our life. So I really appreciated this. I learned an awful lot, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Anne. So glad to hear it. I will go now to Sandy.
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed this. It was very, very interesting. I always go into this thinking if it's not interesting, I'm not going to stay the whole time. And here I am at the end. It was great. And I too was unfamiliar with the Section 230. So I'm going to have to go and research that. I'll do my own fact checking on that. But it was great. And I learned a lot. And I appreciate everybody's giving their perspectives on it.
Thanks, Sandy. Glad we could get you to stay the whole time. I know it's late, no matter where you are here. I see Jonah. What'd you learn? What'd you enjoy?
Hey, yeah, so this was my first time participating in a Braver Angels debate. And well, I didn't really know what to expect going in, but I definitely learned a whole lot, not only about the actual topic of fact checking, but also just that conversations like this are possible through Braver Angels and some other groups, what Braver Angels is doing is I think it's putting on the spotlight these issues that maybe we don't talk about as much, or maybe things that we want to talk about. I mean, you had a whole lot of people today who had a whole lot that they wanted to say, and I think it was good that we all listened to each other. And I think the fact that there are things that can come out of this, such as people learning about Section 230, people learning about some other things. I mean, that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have discussions like this. So I found it very beneficial.
Thanks, Jonah. Appreciate your reflections. And I'm so happy to have you in your first one. Can I ask, how did you hear about the debate tonight?
Yeah, so this is through a class that I'm taking, a leadership class that I'm taking right now. My professor is here, I think, Dr. Pretz. She's somewhere. I saw her in here. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I plan to come back.
Well, wonderful. We'll look forward to having you back. Thanks for joining us tonight. I don't see any more hands, so and we're 5 minutes out from the end here, so I'm gonna move on now to Mary. Okay, we'll go to one more. I think we've got time because I'm just gonna have to run through some announcements quick after. Mary, real quick. You're muted.
Thanks. Hi, I'm new too. This is my first time, and I found out about Braver Angels because I have done my first, well, let me go back to what I loved about tonight, that there was no fighting, how structured it was, how we can talk with each other and disagree in respectful manner and have completely different opinions. And that's what I want for the world right now. So
Thanks,
Mary. Really good. Yeah, and I'm doing some work with the union, with Reed Galen. I did my first group on how to be respectful and listen to each other and start to heal. And that's what got me here.
Well, we're so happy you found your way. Hope to see you in another one soon.
I'll be here.
All right. And wow, it's just been so great to have such an engaged group tonight. I really thought it was a fantastic discussion, and I know that. Have a nice night, everyone. Thanks for joining us in, and see you all soon.